It was daytime, and in a beautiful crowded city somewhere on the planet, Lang was in the middle of the crowd, carrying a box with a stuffed animal and all his belongings. People's attention fixed on him. They wondered what was happening to Lang. They didn't understand why, in the prime of his life, he had decided to resign from his post just like that. The man with earrings placed a hand on his friend's shoulder and, with a serious gaze, began to whisper. He revealed that, due to his negligence in the line of duty, the White Mist Star sector had lost a martial arts genius with extremely exceptional talent. This had provoked the fury of the chief of law enforcement, Lunong. Hearing this, the elf-eared man's eyes widened in surprise, leaving him in shock. The friend felt somewhat confused, not knowing what kind of genius could make Lang, at the peak of level 11, lose his post. The man with earrings mentioned that apparently, the answer wasn't clear. While they were conversing, the only thing Lang could do was lower his head and walk quickly. Lang clenched his teeth tightly, and his eyes began to glow with rage. The only thing he could do was curse Lang under his breath. Consumed by rage, Lang gripped the box tightly and began to scream like a madman. He never would have thought that someone with such an honest appearance could be so malicious. While he admitted to being careless, he wondered if Lan Cheng didn't bear even 1% of the blame. His friend's attention fixed on him, realizing he was about to go crazy. Lang lowered his head and felt depressed. Not knowing what to do now, the others began to whisper among themselves, noting that his mood was changing every second. They wondered if he had already hit menopause, considering that, really, he should retire by now. Lang's face filled with sadness, letting out a sigh. He decided it was best to forget it. If he had to retire, so be it. Besides, he hadn't rested in a long time and would take this opportunity to take his wife and kids on vacation to the garden planet he had just bought. With a smile, Lang closed his eyes and his mouth began to water as he thought about what he had heard of the garden planet, a place with waterfalls of syrup, lakes of noodles with scallion oil, lamb skewers that sprouted from the ground, and trees full of draft beer fruits. Noticing this, the people felt somewhat confused and found it disgusting that he had become happy again. While Lang was lost in his thoughts, a hologram of Lunong appeared behind him. With eyes glowing with rage, he announced that he had an emergency announcement. Hearing Lunong's voice, Lang snapped out of his trance, his eyes widening with curiosity. Lunong stared at Lang, clenched his teeth, and with a furious gaze announced that the level 11 enforcer, Lang, due to negligence in the line of duty, had committed a grave and unforgivable error in his work. This had caused enormous and incalculable losses to the White Mist sector. The circumstances were severe, and his crime was unforgivable, for which the punishment was as follows: the lifelong revocation of his noble title, with his descendants forbidden from applying for noble status for 3 generations. His dismissal from the post of level 11 enforcer, and his banishment to the level 8 war planet to guard it for 3,000 years. Lang turned around and his eyes widened in fear, his body beginning to tremble in shock. Not long after, Lang dropped his box of belongings, letting it fall to the ground. Poor Lang fell to his knees, unable to stop himself from panicking. His mind was filled with questions. He didn't know why this was happening to him. Tears began to stream from his eyes like an endless river. He knew he was finished. He was lost. 3,000 years. And all for letting a single person escape. Consumed by despair, Lang collapsed to the ground, asking if his mistake was truly that serious. Meanwhile, somewhere else, someone was training with martial fire. It was none other than Lu Sheng. Our boy clenched his fist, and as his eyes shone with determination, martial fire began to emerge from his body. Lu Sheng delivered a powerful blow, shattering the stone wall to pieces. Then, he turned his back and, as he walked away, he mentally reviewed his rewards. An unlimited supply of all necessary resources for cultivation, an honorary Viscount title, a full set of level 11 weapons and equipment, and the latest private spaceship. Lu Sheng returned to his mansion, sat on his sofa, and as he wiped away his sweat, he began to drink a delicious shake. He reflected on what it felt like to be the sector's darling. It was incredibly cool to have all the resources of an entire sector dedicated solely to him. Lu Sheng opened the system window and with a serene gaze began to browse through it. Knowing that as long as it wasn't an overly excessive request, he could basically get anything he wanted. His eyes began to in with joy, a smile appearing on his face. Now he wouldn't have to worry at all about resources for cultivation. He thought that when he left the blue planet, his goal had been to work hard to save up and buy a couple of habitable planets. However, almost carelessly, he now owned an entire star system. The system began to display a list of planets. Lu Sheng observed it attentively and with a smile, and decided to choose several good habitable planets to assign one to each main province of the Dragon Nation. Lu Sheng chose a planet, put his hand under his chin, and his eyes began to shine. With a mischievous smile, he decided that as for the other countries, it would be enough for them to cram onto a single planet. Lu Sheng began to imagine Milton's scared witless, apologizing and begging for his life. With a serene gaze, Lu Sheng thought that now, if he wanted to teach Milton a lesson, he wouldn't need to beat around the bush anymore. He could stand right in front of his father and give him a couple of good slaps. And his father would probably even applaud and congratulate him on how well he had slapped him. Lu Sheng put his arms behind his head and wondered what his parents' reaction would be when they heard this news. At that moment, a woman with sensual legs began to walk towards him. It was an elf-eared woman carrying a folder with reports. She entered our boy's room and with a kind smile informed him that the planetary class ships he had requested were all now in position. Hearing her voice, Lu Sheng snapped out of his trance, his eyes widening in surprise. Our boy stood up and with a calm smile, asked her to take him for a look. As he was quite curious about ships capable of housing the people of an entire planet. With a nervous expression, she adjusted a lock of her hair, began to look at the floor, and informed him that there was a snag. The ships couldn't depart yet, because this area belonged to the White Mist sector, and they were looking for a way to solve the problem. Lu Sheng put his hand under his chin, his eyes widening in confusion, puzzled that the area belonged to the White Mist sector. At that moment, our boy's phone started to ring. When he turned it on, he saw he had a video call from Snowy, his fiancée. In a worried tone, she asked him if Lu Sheng grew curious and asked her what was wrong. Snowy's eyes began to fill with sadness. She looked down at the ground and revealed that the blue planet seemed to be in serious trouble. Lu Sheng was shocked, not knowing what was happening. Lu Sheng's mother and father were with Snowy, their expressions full of worry. The mother asked Qin Shui if she had finished talking with little Sheng and if he had said when he would be back, as he had already been away for several months. The father, who was smoking, crossed his arms and began to ponder in silence. With a stern expression, he told his wife she was being silly. He reminded her that their son had gone into the universe and asked if she even knew how big it was, explaining that this wasn't like going to the corner market, a 10-minute round trip. He insisted that it wasn't that easy and that she should stop worrying over nothing. The mother's attention fixed on him, her eyes widening in surprise. The mother thought that he was right. She decided to go prepare a meal, hoping that little Sheng could return soon. With a kind smile, Snowy assured the mother that she shouldn't worry. She explained that Lu Sheng was doing wonderfully in the universe, and they even said he had become a count, so there was no reason for concern. As Snowy's eyes shone with tranquility, she turned to the father and with a smile, said she was going out for a walk. With a smile, the father nodded. Not long after, Snowy left the mansion and began to look at the ground with a lost expression. While she was distracted, a purple-haired woman appeared in front of her, catching her attention. Hearing her voice, Snowy raised her head, her eyes widening in surprise and curiosity. This woman was Lin Zhengyu, who extended her hand, greeted her as Mrs. Lu, and asked what Lu Sheng had said. Snowy observed her and, in a sincere tone, admitted that he would return as soon as he could, and that he would also help them solve this problem through other channels. Lin Zhengyu clenched her fist, her eyes filling with confusion. She didn't know what she meant by other channels. Snowy remained calm, revealing that she wasn't sure of the details, as he didn't go into specifics. He just told them not to worry. Lin Zhengyu lamented that, in the end, their power was too weak, as a planet from a low-level civilization. They only qualified to be exploited and oppressed. Her eyes began to shine with sadness and fear. She explained that the previous guide, named Lan Cheng, had been quite reasonable, but he had suddenly been replaced by a new one. Even though they had just collected the resources, W1 now wanted them to deliver them again, and the quota was hundreds of times higher than the last. She was sure he was just trying to line his own pockets. With a gaze full of curiosity and confusion, Snowy wondered if, judging by the situation, they couldn't gather enough. Lin Zhengyu began to ponder in silence. Then her eyes began to shine with seriousness. She stated that it was like trying to shear enough wool for an entire clothing factory from a single sheep. It was a completely impossible task. Not even by paying out of their own pockets could they gather half. Then, she closed her eyes, accepting the unfair reality that the weak get bullied, and the skinny horse gets ridden. Snowy's eyes widened with serenity. She believed that when Liu Sheng returned, everything would be resolved without a problem. Lin Zhengyu clenched her fist, admitting that she actually preferred not to have to rely on Liu Sheng's power to solve this problem, but they had been pushed to the point of having no other choice. She began to imagine hundreds of spaceships ready to invade the blue planet. Her eyes started to shine with fear, knowing that with Liu Sheng's temperament, he would surely confront that guide upon his return. And while dealing with a single guide was easy, she feared that next time he would come with an entire star fleet behind him. The image of Liu Sheng came to her mind. She was sincere and admitted that Liu Sheng's talent and genius in martial arts were astonishing. Without a doubt, he had an immense future ahead of him. If because of them, he provoked a powerful enemy and this hindered his martial path, then the inhabitants of the blue planet would be guilty of a crime that not even dying 10,000 times could atone for. Snowy stood listening in silence without interrupting. She placed her hand over her chest, and her eyes filled with sadness, admitting that she didn't really know how to describe Liu Sheng's current situation in the universe either. She only knew something about him being a count and that he had just bought a spaceship to pick them up, but she didn't quite understand what level all of this represented. She lifted her head and began to recall the video call she had with Liu Sheng. With a kind and confident smile, Liu Sheng had assured her that he had the power to solve it and that they should wait for him to return. Meanwhile, Liu Sheng met with Sebastian and Ecclesia. While they conversed, Sebastian was sitting and drinking a glass of wine. Liu Sheng turned to them and, as his eyes shone with tranquility, he told them more or less what the situation was. Calmly, Sebastian took a sip of his wine. Liu Sheng's gaze fixed on him, his eyes widening with seriousness. Now that he thought about it, he felt a little embarrassed. The chairman was in charge of countless planets of all sizes, and here he was, asking him to personally help resolve such an insignificant matter. To him, this was like someone having a chicken stolen from their yard and going directly to the emperor for justice, and to top it all off, the emperor of another country. Liu Sheng turned to Ecclesia and asked the Chief of Justice how they could resolve this situation, admitting that he didn't know who else to turn to and asking if she had any solution. Hearing our boy's voice, she snapped out of her trance, feeling somewhat surprised and not knowing what to say. She placed her hand under her chin and with a calm expression mentioned that the blue star was, in the end, A resource planet subordinate to the White Mist Star Zone, so the forces of the Yamu Star Zone couldn't intervene directly. However, this was easy to handle. She just needed to contact some star nobles close to his home star system. She extended her hand, assuring him that with the influence of these nobles, resolving a small problem from the resource department wouldn't be difficult at all. She informed him that she would arrange it immediately and that there was no need to rush. Liu Sheng thanked her. As Ecclesia's eyes were shining with love, she placed her hand on her chest. She told him that this was a minor matter and that, actually, she also had something she needed to bother him with. Hearing this, with a curious smile, Liu Sheng extended his hand, curious to hear it.